Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar today. My name is Barney Ridley and I'm a Senior Content Producer for Oncology Professional Care. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this webinar today, which we are running in partnership with Radiotherapy UK. Oncology Professional Care is absolutely honoured to be working with Radiotherapy UK this year, not only for this webinar, but also for our flagship show taking place next month from 21st to the 22nd of May at the London Excel, where the team will be taken to the stage to present once again, this time not virtually, but in our brand new theatre, the RadChat Radiotherapy Theatre, hosted by the lovely people over at RadChat. This theatre will be filled with engaging content targeting all those working in radiotherapy, with sessions covering cutting-edge advancements and innovations, best practices, and empowering narratives for people with lived experience. You can still register for the show for free online at the Oncology Professional Care website. We would love to have you join us, and I'm sure that Radiotherapy UK would be very excited to see you all once again, this time in person at the show. Now, you didn't tune in to hear me speak, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for the webinar. Following a call from the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Radiotherapy, Radiotherapy UK facilitated the creation of a 10-year vision for world-class radiotherapy in the UK, in order to urge the government and decision makers to take action and recognise the potential of radiotherapy, which is cost-effective, curative, and proven to help patients live better and longer. In this webinar, Sarah will explore the 6 pillars of the vision and its recommendations, and welcome Andy Tudor to share his experience of radiotherapy and how a UK vision could revolutionise outcomes for patients. We will have about 5 minutes after the talk for some very quick Q&A at the end, but for now, I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Barney. If we could have the first slide up. Brilliant, thank you so much. So yes, thank you so much for joining myself and Andy this afternoon. My name is Sarah Quinlan. I am the director with Radiotherapy UK, and I'm so happy this afternoon to be joined by Andy Tudor, who has undergone surgery and radiotherapy for a brain tumour. Andy was an engineer and is now retired, and thankfully for us has become a huge advocate for cancer patients, winning awards for his contributions as a volunteer. And he's really generously agreed to join us this afternoon and share his story and why a vision for radiotherapy is important from a patient's perspective, because that is key. Then I'm going to share a little bit more detail about what the vision contains and key elements, really outlining what a world-class radiotherapy service would look like and the steps that need to be taken to achieve that. Okay, so if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. Before we did talk about the vision, I just wanted to take this opportunity to let you know a little bit more about Radiotherapy UK and the work of the charity and really what we do. Hopefully you will have heard of us, but we are a really small charity. There's a team of 4 of us, but we do pack quite a large punch. So really 1 in every 4 people in the UK will need radiotherapy in their lifetime. It's one of the 3 main cancer treatments alongside surgery and chemotherapy, and is required in 50% of cancer treatments and in 40% of cancer cures. However, radiotherapy has been historically underinvested in and receives really only about 5% of the cancer budget, which means that innovative and personalized technologies that are currently revolutionizing radiotherapy treatments for patients worldwide, enabling them to live longer and to live better lives, and also, crucially, delivering increased treatment capacity, aren't happening as quickly as we would like them to in the UK. And Radiotherapy UK is the only charity in the UK dedicated to improving access to high-quality radiotherapy treatment and support. And we try and do this in 3 different ways. So the first thing we are developing is our patient support. So we provide information and resources to patients. We're currently redeveloping our patient information hub on our website, We really have worked very hard to achieve PIF accreditation, which is the Trusted Patient Information Mark. And last week, we were delighted to launch our first video in collaboration with Virtual Limited to help patients prepare for the experience of external beam radiotherapy for breast cancer. And what makes us quite unique, and this is what we talk to patients about and patients tell us they would like, is that we're using animation and we're using 3D techniques to help patients understand exactly what is happening, because radiotherapy is technical and it's really helpful if you can understand why you're getting radiotherapy, what it does to your body, and what it looks like for the organs inside your body whenever it's tackling that tumor. So we also then, you probably, hopefully will have heard of our campaigning work, because we are quite loud and we are quite feisty. And I suppose that's because we want desperately to see better outcomes for patients. So we run the Catch Up with Cancer campaign, which is the longest and the loudest campaign, highlighting the record waits patients are currently experiencing for access to treatment and calling for a cancer plan for the UK. We are one of the only countries in the world now that does not have a cancer plan, and it's essential that we have one back in place and that cancer is prioritised within healthcare. We also obviously highlight radiotherapy. Yesterday, we had a big piece in the national newspaper, The Express, which was showing our recent report about travel times. And again, this is about showing the inequality of access throughout the UK to radiotherapy. We have about 7.4 million people who live beyond the recommended time away from their closest radiotherapy centre. And what that looks like is radiotherapy deserts. Some areas in the UK, lots of people are very close to their centre, but there's real areas where patients are having to travel 90 minutes or 2 hours either way to access their radiotherapy care. And finally, we work with the workforce as well. We support the development and engagement of a highly skilled and dynamic radiotherapy workforce. And we do this through lots of different ways. We are very much about providing a voice for the frontline workforce. So we run workforce surveys, we have ambassadors groups, and we are also running a series of workforce webinars. The next one on our RT UK Talks series is called Sexual Wellbeing and Cancer, and it's happening on Thursday, the 25th of April. So do follow us on our socials and our website to register for that too. Thank you. So just move on the slide, please. We're here today to talk about the World-class Radiotherapy in the UK vision document that Radiotherapy UK facilitated. And just a little bit of insight into how this came about and how it was delivered. It really came about because at the minute we have nearly 1 in 4 cancer patients that are waiting too long for their cancer treatment. We know that by 2040, there is an estimated increase of people with cancer in the UK by 1/3 to 500,000. And we also know that access to radiotherapy in the UK is much, much lower than international consensus, currently sitting at about 27% when it really should be at 53%. And devastatingly, the UK survival remains near the bottom of international cancer survival tables. So the context is that cancer care in the UK is in crisis, and there needs to be prioritization and direction and leadership to take it forward. As a charity, we are secretariat to the APPG for Radiotherapy, which is the all political party group, which sits in Westminster. And it's a cross-party group of parliamentarians who are all keen to see increased investment in radiotherapy to improve cancer services for their constituents. And this APPG held a number of inquiries into the current cancer environment and radiotherapy services, and really noted the lack of long-term planning and leadership. So last summer, they asked us as the Secretariat to facilitate a vision for radiotherapy, really to show what can be achieved over the next decade to transform radiotherapy services and improve how long and how well patients live. So our approach to this was collaborative from the very beginning. Any vision for radiotherapy that's going to be developed needs to be developed in partnership with those receiving the treatment and those delivering the treatment. So to achieve this, we undertook patient and frontline workforce surveys. We met with charities, workforce, industry representatives, professional organizations, experts and academics. And we asked them, what does world-class radiotherapy look like and how would we get there? We also supported this with publicly available data and information and research that we could access. And we pulled together all the contributions. And this paper was facilitated by radiotherapy, but co-authored with two fantastic contributors, the wonderful Dr. Katie Wakeham, who is a clinical oncologist in London, and the fantastically experienced Tim Cooper, who was an advisor who was involved in developing and delivering a similar vision in 2009. And with Tim and Katie's expertise, both in the technical side of radiotherapy, also in the sense of how do we create a document that can actually influence and impact change, we worked really hard to create a very accessible, realistic, and ambitious way forward. But as noted, the point of this piece of work is ultimately to improve things for patients. So before we move into the detail of the document, I think this is a really good place to bring in Andy to share his story.
Thanks, Sarah. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Hi, I'm Andy. I don't work for the Radiotherapy UK. I volunteer for a number of cancer and brain tumor related charities, trying to do my bit. Now, you hear the statistics quite often, 1 in 2 people in their lifetime will get cancer. Well, I've taken one for the team, so I've had that. More sobering for me is that typically only 12% of people diagnosed with a brain tumor survive 5 years. I'm 7 years now, so when I say I'm pleased to be here, I really am pleased to be here. So why am I talking today? Well, the one thing the charity is very good at is hearing the patient voice and taking into account the patient voice. So I've been volunteering with them for over a year now, helping them out with videos for the website, information, and so on and so forth, and doing what I'm doing today, which is helping, hopefully being advocate for better radiotherapy right across the length and breadth of the country. In terms of my history, 7 years ago, like I said, I was diagnosed with a large meningioma, right parietal, so that's top right, just under 7 centimeters. So it had to come out straight away. So that was brain surgery. Then I had all clear for about 5 years, and 2 years ago was diagnosed with recurrence. Thankfully, because they called it earlier, it was about the size of a thumbnail, which in my world is pretty small. And so that was suitable for treatment with stereotactic radiotherapy, or gamma knife, it's also known as. So I had that treatment just over 2 years ago now, and thankfully, touch wood, just in February this year, I got the all clear, where the neurosurgeon team, the radiotherapy team, are confident that they've destroyed the recurrence. There's still some scar tissue left. However, they said there's no reason why I shouldn't carry on now. I think with radio surgery or gamma knife, there's about a 90% chance of success, which by that means all clear for 10 years. So I'll definitely take those odds. So while I'm unlucky to have a brain tumor, I consider myself extremely lucky to be here to talk about it and hopefully give the patient perspective. I realize I'm luckier than most, but kind of that's part of what I'm here to sort of to speak on their behalf. So what I would say, since my radiotherapy and since my surgery, in fact, I've had a pretty good recovery. I'm left with some deficits around spatial awareness, so I don't drive, around extra fatigue, tiredness, tinnitus, and some balance issues, but I can still lead a pretty good, normal, active life. However, surgery compared to radiotherapy. Could you move on to the next slide, please? Apologies if you're having your lunch, but the picture on the left is the scar that was left after my brain surgery. So it's about a 12-inch scar across the top right-hand side of my skull, where they basically had to, where they basically had to take the skull off, and in the technical term of the consultant, hoover out the brain tumor. That was successful. However, it took me about 4.5 months just to get back to work part-time, and it took about 8 months to get back to work full-time. So that was a major trauma, both for me, for my health, and for my family as well. My daughter said I had the easy seat because if I didn't wake up, I wouldn't know, which is quite telling. But that was surgery. Then when I had the radiotherapy, as you can see from the picture on the right, it was much, much easier. The actual radiotherapy itself, Gamma knife, in terms of, I'm sure there's lots of very clever people on the call, but it's effectively like the old Ghostbusters film where they say, don't cross the beams. They cross the beams. So the beams in themselves individually aren't enough to damage healthy tissue. Where they cross, it will kill healthy tissue. So it has to be very accurate, and it has to be very well planned, the radiotherapy or the gamma knife surgery itself. And I think that applies to virtually all uses of radiotherapy. It has to be planned carefully, and it has to be planned with experts as well. So the treatment itself, I actually didn't know if the camera was, the machine was switched on, because I didn't feel a thing. I also had the surgery or the treatment in my own clothes, which is always good. Feels a bit less harsh when you're in your own clothes. And I went home that afternoon. All I felt was about a week to 10 days of extra fatigue. And that was it. No extra symptoms and nothing since. So for me, radiotherapy compared to surgery is absolutely massive difference. And it helps with the early detection, which allows you to have better treatment and much less invasive treatment. So I guess I'm not unique, but I'm unusual in that I've had both surgery and radiotherapy. And believe me, radiotherapy is by far the better. So like I said, I've gone on to have a reasonably healthy lifestyle since. If you put the next slide up, please. I'm happy to, or able to, go on holiday. That was the Grand Canyon, not Bognor Regis. I'm happy to do most of the things I could do before, not contact sport, obviously, but pretty much everything else. And I've been lucky. I mean, I don't volunteer for awards, no one does, but I've been able to get some awards. So I'm the current volunteer of the year for the brain tumor charity, and I got a third sector sort of charity award as well last year. So to me, all that shows is that people are listening, and then hopefully I'm making a difference. So next slide, please. So why do we need a world-class radiotherapy vision? Now, I think, talking to many, many people, both with brain tumors and with other cancers, the 4 things that get you through treatment and to hopefully a reasonably good outcome are a plan, hope, love from family and friends, and luck. Those are the 4 things, in my view, and talking to lots of others, that you need to get through. Now, when you're first told you have a life-threatening condition that requires radiotherapy, other 4-letter words tend to go through your mind. My first question was, how long have I got? As are many. Then once you get over the initial shock, it's the plan that you need to give you the hope that you can get through to a reasonable outcome, whatever that outcome may be. Outcomes sometimes are measured in weeks, months, years of lifetime. Certain deficits, people are left with all sorts of challenges and issues across all the cancers. However, you need the plan and you need the hope. The love and the luck hopefully will come as well. So when you're told by a specialist that you need to have radiotherapy, it's life-saving, and the sooner you have it, the better, you need to have it when the experts tell you that you need to have it. If you have to wait, it is absolutely soul-destroying and is really detrimental, not just to the physical outcomes, and there are statistics about the longer you wait for radiotherapy, the material impact it has on how less successful your outcome is, but on the mental health as well. If you're told you need treatment by a certain time and you don't get it, your mental health really suffers, because all the time the clock is ticking. Every day, every week that you don't have your radiotherapy, you know that your outcome will get worse. So you need to be spending your energy, and your family need to be spending their energy on recovery, preparing for the radiotherapy, and recovery afterwards. You can't afford to be spending your energy worrying about when the radiotherapy will actually take place. It's a fundamental given. So the reason we need a world-class vision is, again, when I was told I have a life-threatening condition and I need radiotherapy, I'll be honest, the first thing that went through my mind wasn't, oh, I hope there's a 10-year radiotherapy vision. However, what you want is treatment on time and hopefully somewhere close enough that you can get to reasonably easily. And that's where the vision comes in. So the vision hopefully will allow decision makers, policy makers, people that hold influence, people that hold budgets to actually make sure that people do get access to radiotherapy where they need it and when they need it. I was lucky, I guess, again, that I live about 40 minutes from my nearest neurological radiotherapy centre. So I live near Portsmouth. The nearest one to me is Southampton, world-class centre. So I lucked out in the postcode that I'm close enough to be treated reasonably quickly in a world-class facility. And the treatment I've had from Southampton Hospital has been world-class throughout. And again, I'm lucky I've not had to wait for my treatment, but I've spoken to many others that have. So I'm okay. I can't drive. So luckily my wife always drives me. Otherwise, it would be at least 2 buses and a train, if not an Uber. Sorry, taxi. Other taxis are available. So I'm just on the edge. I'm about 40 to 41 minutes away. So as we heard yesterday, as Sarah's already mentioned, there are over 7 million people in the UK outside of that 45-minute sort of recommended journey time. So we need more, and we need it. We need to have better time. So my plea on behalf of all the patients that are about to go through radiotherapy, and that's going to be a lot of people on this webinar, all the people that are going through it or have gone through it, and sadly, the people that aren't here to talk about it, is that we need that world-class vision for radiotherapy today, tomorrow. We need it ASAP. And anything we can do, I can do to help the charity get there will just be one of the best legacies I could possibly leave. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Andy. I mean, it's just incredible to hear you talk about your own experience and then just your passion and desire to help other people. And we so appreciate it. And it just means that everybody understands better what we're talking about here. You know, we can talk about visions, we can talk about plans, but actually what we're talking about is people, families, lives, memories, and making moments together. So thank you so much for bringing that to the table as well. We really appreciate it. So if, as Andy's saying, you know, that was the patient's perspective, and then how do we translate that into what does that actually look like? And again, the purpose of this document and this piece of work, it's not to create a strategy as such, because what we want is we wanted to create something that is accessible, that people can read. So the people who actually make the decisions, like the politicians, they can read this and they can understand it, and they can understand what it does and what the impact of radiotherapy is in quite simple ways, because radiotherapy is a technical treatment, and it's you know, it's extraordinarily high technology and innovative, and it's complicated, and sometimes that creates barriers in how people can understand it and can understand what it does. So one of our aims was to create something that's quite accessible, and I hope that we've achieved that within this document. And what we did was we tried to set out 6 key areas of action. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. The 6 key areas of action, and we didn't start off with 6, we started off with about 20. But then as we spoke to more people and engaged with different groups, we were able to bring it down to these key areas. And they are looking at leadership, access, workforce, data, research, and investment. And what we did, and it was a process, as I say, working with lots of different groups, speaking to lots of different people, is that we outlined for each area the challenge that's being faced, what world-class does look like, and the next steps that are taken to achieve world-class. So what I'm going to do now is just go through each of these areas and just talk to those 3 areas. So what the challenge is and what the solution really is. So the first area was leadership. And what we were seeing as the main challenge within that is really a failure to plan and a failure to invest in the services. And this failure had led to shortages in the workforce, into modern equipment, and piecemeal implementation of advances in radiotherapy treatment. This is characterized by, I'm sure if you work in the NHS, this will be quite familiar, irregular funding streams, quite bureaucratic systems, and a lack of technology horizon scanning and seeing what's coming down the future. How is that evaluated to understand what the benefits of it are? And once evaluated, how is it implemented in an equitable way? This within radiotherapy has also been made slightly more difficult recently with the increasing development of radiotherapy service provision planning. And this does make coordinated approaches much more difficult. In summer of last year, Radiotherapy UK undertook a Freedom of Information ask, and we found out that 70% of the ICBs in England, who now have responsibility for radiotherapy service provision, had no named person responsible for ensuring access to sufficient treatment capacity for radiotherapy. So again, 1 in 2 patients with cancer will need radiotherapy, and yet in England, the ICBs that are now accountable for the delivery of that services didn't have anybody who was ultimately responsible for that. And this is a lack of leadership. So what would world-class look like? So world-class would look like, first of all, on the ground, it's about leadership training and support, which is embedded at every level of the radiotherapy service delivery. And it's about having effective leaders in place and then nurturing more leaders across the multidisciplinary workforce. So not just managers, but also frontline workers across every level. And the way that I suppose we thought that you could deliver better leadership was by better coordination. And what's been put forward is to establish an independent, accountable UK-wide planning and strategic group. Crucially, this needs to be supported by healthcare commissioners across the 4 nations, and this group would then create and deliver a national plan for radiotherapy. As I mentioned earlier on, we currently don't have a cancer plan. There's a multi-diseases plan, which cancer will sit under, which probably isn't what international policy would say is good or is supported for the best outcomes for patients. So as I say, we would campaign for a national cancer plan, and then within that there would be a national plan for radiotherapy. And this plan is what would be used to inform long-term policy and investment. But it takes leadership to deliver on that. And that is something that will be critical to the success of delivering cancer services, but specifically radiotherapy. So the second pillar that we are looking at then is access. And Andy's talked really well about, how important it is to be able to access radiotherapy treatment, both on time and geographically, what that looks like for a patient in terms of their experience of getting to treatment. And the challenge, the wider challenge within the UK is that patient access to modern radiotherapy is much lower than international benchmarks. So saying there's 27% access within the UK, and really that should be much closer to 50%. And it's also highly variable depending on where patients live. So just to give you an example of that, there is quite a slow adoption of technology due to procurement barriers and workforce training. And this results in marked regional variation in services. For example, the variation in delivery of intensity modulated radiotherapy, or IMRT, in the NHS, it's considered to be quite a routine treatment in many countries, but in 2022, its use varied from 45 to 65% across England. In the year 2020 to 21, we know from audits that 6% of men having curative radiotherapy for prostate cancer still received older 3D conformal methods of radiotherapy planning. So older radiotherapy treatments. And this type of treatment is much less focused and is also associated with worse long-term side effects. So it's quite clear that there's a high variation depending on where you live as to what quality of treatment you're able to access. And this is also shown through the number of linear accelerators, which is radiotherapy machines. In the UK, it's estimated to be at about 5.1 per million population. And this is much below comparative European countries who have an estimated equivalent number of between 7 to 10 linacs per million population. And I mean, there is wide disparity there, but what we say within the document is that this needs to be understood. It needs to be understood as to why this is happening, and why the UK has a much lower utilization of radiotherapy. Andy also talked there about getting treatment on time. And as I said at the start of this, some of the reason we came up with this document and thought there was such a need and such a gap for a vision of this type is because cancer patients are quite simply waiting too long for their treatment. In October 23, only 13 of the 144 listed NHS England providers hit the overall target of a cancer patient receiving their treatment within 62 days of decision to treat, meaning that 37% of cancer patients are waiting too long for treatment. And in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, no provider met the 62-day target. And in the quarter ending September 2023, over 14,500 people waited longer than 62 days to start cancer treatment in the UK. We ran an event for World Cancer Day at Westminster, and we calculated from NHS data that over 220,000 patients have waited too long for their cancer treatment since 2020. And that's shocking. So what would world-class access to radiotherapy look like? It would look like there is a high level of accurate and precise radiotherapy delivered to all patients across the UK, that there's equal access to high-quality radiotherapy without this unnecessary regional variation, and also that waiting times are based on achieving the best possible outcomes. Waiting times need to reflect the best time for treatment, not the slowest achievable time. And also the patients, and really importantly, this is what patients talk to us about all the time, they have equal access to the ongoing technological advances that provide best outcomes. Because patients talk to each other across the UK and they're finding out that some patients are receiving some types of treatment and that's not available in other areas. So what we would like to see is equal access to radiotherapy across the 4 nations by 2034. How to achieve this? It really means initially there has to be a review of waiting time targets, and also a review of why our utilization is so much lower, and an understanding so that we can start tackling those issues. And also one of the big area that came through when talking to patients, and it's highlighted throughout the document, is access to late effect support services for patients who are continuing to have side effects and late effects months to years after treatment. There's very little support available, and that has been a huge area of need, and it's highlighted as a major area that needs to be addressed in the upcoming decade. Okay, so then moving on to the workforce. Radiotherapy in the UK is delivered by a really small, multidisciplinary and highly skilled workforce, but it's really only about 6,400 of a workforce, and there are chronic shortages across all the disciplines, mainly driven by really poor recruitment and retention. So data from the 3 professional bodies, which is IPEM, RCR and SOR, show that there is a current shortfall of about 9% of staff. And we have made some calculations around that, and to meet the increasing number of cancer patients forecast by 2040, the workforce will need to increase by 1/3, or around 2,000 professionals. So there's a massive piece of work to do around addressing the gaps now, and then looking to see what the future is going to hold and what the workforce needs to be able to do in the next generation. World-class radiotherapy workforce, and this we went out and asked, what does a world-class radiotherapy workforce look like? And what came back was resilient, skilled and valued workforce of sustainable numbers with a capacity to develop, train new staff, undertake personal development and training, and harness also the transformative potential of new innovations such as AI to deliver high quality and innovative cancer treatment. So what we would like to see and what we set out in this document is immediately put in place a plan to close the radiotherapy professionals workforce gap, currently estimated at 600. That is not a large number. And, we really need to see efforts being put in place now by the government, by NHS leadership to close that gap. And then alongside that, there needs to be the ability to develop, fund and deliver a comprehensive 10-year radiotherapy specific workforce plan, creating a sustainable and flexible workforce that is equipped to harness the advances in healthcare. And so moving on to data, and these will also, as hopefully as I'm talking about it, there's lots of linkages and they all tie in together. The challenge with data, radiotherapy is such a data-heavy, data-driven cancer treatment. But really what we were seeing, and everybody was telling us as well, was that there's a lack of coordinated data systems to maximize this potential learning and then to deliver change. So despite the potential within radiotherapy data to drive improvements, their use just isn't being optimized. And this is also exacerbated by just on a basic level, IT connectivity. And that means that the variation that we have across the radiotherapy services and the access and the patient outcomes just is not very well understood. Additionally, the data that's available is not always accessible or aligned to what's needed to understand the outcomes at a provider level or to allow us to benchmark services nationally. Data is currently collected by different groups, including clinicians, professional bodies, health commissioners, and there's lots of different initiatives happening. But what we are being told is that this quite often places a really unnecessary burden of multiple and repetitive data collection on providers. And again, to go back to late effects, there's limited data being collected on long-term side effects from radiotherapy, whereas a better understanding of the numbers of patients experiencing late effects could inform services and enable delivery of necessary support to these patients. So what we would like to see put in place around that is an overarching radiotherapy data strategy, coordinating the data and driving improvements in patient care. There really needs to be a single integrated data source from radiotherapy providers, which drives improvements. And it's really important that we actually use the learning from the data to drive this change. There's a lot of data being collected, but it needs to be collected effectively and it needs to be used to make things better for patients. Research was another key area. And again, the challenge within research, it's quite similar. There's no central coordination of radiotherapy research and funding's really difficult to obtain. So there is a lot of capacity within radiotherapy research to drive improvements in cancer care, leading to better outcomes, better quality of life, and increased survival. But again, it's not being optimized in the UK. Despite having a really unique network of radiotherapy providers that tightly connected through the NHS, which would provide a unique environment to actually allow translational research to flourish. But unfortunately, the recent demise of the National Cancer Research Institute has the central coordination of radiotherapy research has been lost and funding is getting more difficult. So what we would like to see is the development, the funding and implementation of an integrated radiotherapy research strategy, which really covers, discovery, translational laboratory science, technology and imaging innovation and clinical evaluation with health systems and economics research too. There is an awful lot happening, but again, it's quite piecemeal. And if we could have a coordinated approach to that, it would be a much more effective national radiotherapy research strategy in place. And the last one is obviously the one that always comes up, which is investment, because you can have a wish list of all the things you want to do, but currently we are being told there's just no money at all. So this is a massive challenge. It's a massive challenge across the health service. And what we were finding out specifically within radiotherapy is that the current funding systems just aren't there to support a sustainable radiotherapy service that can reflect the ongoing advances or help meet population needs. And what's frustrating about this is that radiotherapy has been underfunded for decades. Only 5% of the cancer budget goes towards it. And this the systems that are in place are quite bureaucratic and they're very hard to navigate. And there are many technological advances in radiotherapy coming through. However, the systems don't reflect that, and they don't allow the teams to deliver on it in order to plan for it. And the transitioning to things like hyperfractionation and more complex image-guided techniques are being held up because there simply aren't the systems to cope with their implementation. So what we are calling for within this vision is a long-term transformative investment attached to the implementation of the Radiotherapy National Plan, and also a reimbursement system that sustainably funds radiotherapy machines and technologies, including software and AI. Investment is key, but we can't shy away from it. You know, investment is required, but it needs to be really smart investment. And we think that radiotherapy can deliver on that. It's an incredibly cost-effective cancer treatment. And with the proper investment, it could be doing so much more, both to cut the waiting list, to increase the capacity, and to improve patient outcomes. So we'll just move on to the next slide. That would be, I'm finishing up now because I'm just aware of time there. Basically, this vision isn't really a document that we want to sit on a shelf. You know, it's a document that the aim of it really was to create a collaborative approach and to drive forward discussions. We have a general election coming up later in the year in England, and really wanted to provide a blueprint for this sitting government and potentially the next sitting government to understand what the potential of radiotherapy is, what it can do, and ways to deliver on that. As a charity, we have taken on a commitment to review and chart the progress of this. So again, it doesn't become something that just sits there and is never looked at again. We are going to undertake an annual audit of it. And I suppose this vision is about setting out how we get to world-class radiotherapy by 2034. But realizing it is in the hands of the politicians and the decision makers and the leaders in healthcare. However, I would say that it's in the power of all of us to continue to collaborate and raise awareness as we continue to advocate for radiotherapy, but ultimately advocate for better radiotherapy treatment for patients. Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah, well, thank you so much for that talk. Thank you. It was very insightful, and thanks particularly to Andy for sharing your story. We have time for a few quick questions. If people do want to just submit them in the chat, and then we'll be able to pick a few out and read them. Whilst we wait for that, I just wanted to ask a question basically around that advocacy piece you mentioned towards the end. You know, is there anything that attendees or viewers can do to help kind of support you and support in driving that vision and that advocacy?
Oh yes, and we with our Catch Up with Cancer campaign, we recently actually had Stephen Fry on board, who did a wonderful video for us encouraging people to sign our Catch Up with Cancer petition. So if after this call we could send the link to the attendees, that would be great. Please do sign that petition. And through that petition as well, you'll receive updates about how to contact your MP. So quite frequently, we will ask people to support the campaign by contacting their MP and letting them know about what the recent wait times are and how they can influence and affect change. Also, in terms of the radiotherapy, if you sign up to our daily news, you know, even things like the travel times report we put out yesterday, it's all about raising awareness. It's all about using your voice to ensure that either your local MP or anybody else you know hears about radiotherapy, understands what cancer patients are facing, and understands that currently what's happening, things aren't getting better for cancer patients at the minute, and we don't see a plan in place to help things improve, and that's what's desperately needed.
Oh, thank you. I don't currently see any questions in the chat, but that was very informative, and I think there's some links in the chat which have been shared, but equally, like you say, we'll try and make sure that links go out to attendees following this. And obviously, if everyone, please do sign up to a newsletter. Please do go onto the website and check out all the resources on there. Unless there are any final questions in the discussion, and not seeing any come up, I will just say thank you so much on behalf of Oncology Professional Care. Thank you everyone for joining. You can, of course, see Radiotherapy UK in person and ask any questions which perhaps you didn't ask here at our flagship show taking place 21st to the 22nd of May at the London Excel. They'll be speaking on the Radiotherapy Theatre. The Radiotherapy Theatre run by RadChat. This theatre runs alongside various other theatres and staged at the wider show, which is free to attend and CPD certified. You can find all our information on Oncology Professional Care's website. But yeah, that is all for today. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.